I can picture my father in his red-checked wool shirt, standing atop the rocks above the lake. When he lifts the coffee pot from the stove, the morning bustle stops. We know, without being told, that it's time to pay attention. He stands at the edge of the camp with the coffee pot in his hands, holding the top in place with the folded pot holder. He pours coffee out to the ground in a thick, brown stream. The sunlight catches the flow, stripping it amber and brown and black as it falls to the earth and streams in the cool morning air. With his face to the morning sun, he pours and speaks into the stillness, hears to the gods of Tahawas. The stream runs down over smooth granite to merge with the lake water, as clear and brown as the coffee. I watch it trickle, picking up bits of pale lichen and soaking a tiny clump of moss as it follows a crack to the water's edge. The moss swells with the liquid and unfurls its leaves to the sun. Then, and only then, does he pour out steaming cups of coffee for himself and my mother, who stands at the stove making pancakes. I was pretty sure that no other family began their day like this, but I never questioned the source of those words, and my father never explained. They were just part of our life among the lakes. But their rhythm made me feel at home, and the ceremony drew a circle round my family. By those words, we said, "Here we are," and I imagined that the land heard us. My mother had her own more pragmatic ritual of respect. The translation of reverence and intention into action. Before we paddled away from any camping place, she made us kids scour the place to be sure that it was spotless. No burnt matchstick, no scrap of paper escaped her notice. And so we did. We also had to leave wood for the next person's fire with tinder and kindling, carefully sheltered from rain by a sheet of birch bark. I like to imagine their pleasure, those other paddlers, arriving after dark to find a ready pile of fuel to warm their evening meal. My mother's ceremony connected us to them, too.
Difficult questions for any people who for centuries have met with derogation of identity. Pride is often born in the place where we refuse to be victims, where we experience our own humanity under pressure, where we understand that we are not the hateful projections of others, but intrinsically ourselves. Where does this take us? It helps us fight for survival, first of all, because we know from somewhere we deserve to survive. I am not an inferior life form becomes there is sacred life, energy, plenitude in me, and in those like me you are trying to destroy. And if, in the example of others like me, I learn not only survival, but the plenitude of life, if I feel linked by a texture of value, history, words, passion to people long dead, or whom I've never met? If I celebrate these linkages, is this what I mean by pride? Or am I really talking about love? The word safe has two distinct connotations. One, of a place in which we can draw breath, rest from persecution or harassment, bear witness, lick our wounds, feel compassion and love around us rather than hostility or indifference. The safety of mother's lap for the bullied child, of the battered women's shelter, the door opened to us when we needed a refuge. Safety in this sense implies a place to gather our forces, a place to move from, not a destination. But there's also the safety of armoured and concluded mind, the safety of the barricaded door, which will not open for the beleaguered strangers, the psychotic safety of the underground nuclear bomb shelter, the walled and guarded crime-proof condominium, the safety bought with guns and money at no matter what cost, the safety bought and sold at the cost of shutting up. And this safety becomes a dead end in the mind and in the mapping of a life or a collective vision. If I am not for yourself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? If not with others, how?
아 효진 이거 하고 싶어서 왔어요. 이거 하고 싶어서? 오 잘한다. 아이 안 지쳐있죠. 허리를 조금만 이거 좀 저어줬어.
생각하는 마음으로 그런 거 아니야? 아니
애 때문에.
엄마가 아니 남편 때문에.
왜냐면 나는 기운이 너무 로우해가지고.
그럼 다행이지. 신경 쓰이면 다행이지.
그러면 얘가 나 몰라.
그러게 여름에 이미 안 쓰고 괜찮으면 써야지 이렇게 생각했을 건데.
가야 돼. 그럼 나도 15일이나 남았어. 그래서 크리스마스 때는 다 써려고.
이거 그렇게 나가?
아니었다가 지금은 내리는 전체.
이 사람 지금 꽃 하나 먹었어. 누가 먹었어? 이거 누가 먹었어?
안 먹었어.
꽃을 누가 먹었어?
먹은 사람이 없어?
와서 먹었나
우리 아까
보다.
3개 났어.
와서 드셨죠?
그죠?
와서 먹었나 보네.
미애가 먹었어요?
Sunset, the sky's all blurred with shades of dusk. A conch blares somewhere, blends with the faint post drum. Back at far havens, fishermen rest their oars, bound for lone hamlets. Herd boys tap on horns. Wind sweeps through the woods. Birds' wings wear out in flight. Dew falls on roads. The traveller's steps make haste. One stays at home, the other roams the world. To whom confide what chills or warms my heart? Remember the Essex 39. My parents knew what it is to be a refugee, to be dispossessed of your right to be a subject. But they're refugees not because they ever stopped loving their home, but because they loved their children more, because they loved life more. And they clung to the tender hope of a better life, of life itself. How could we ever deprive any human of that hope? We simply cannot.
To imagine the world without borders is not to imagine a world where migrants and citizens have equal access to low-wage, insecure, poor work. It's not to imagine a world where migrants and citizens have equal access to stingy, heavily surveyed and demeaning benefits. And it's not to imagine a world where we all have access to old age, impoverishment and lack of care. It's to imagine a much better world than that, and to believe that a much better world is possible based on the principle that if we share, there is enough to go around. To imagine a world without borders is to imagine a world that is dramatically different from how we live today. It's to imagine a different kind of economy, a different kind of society, and a different kind of politics where political debate really does matter and make a difference. It's also to imagine a different kind of social relations between us. A social relation that isn't based on fear, and this is mine, and there is not enough, and I'm not going to share. Now I know that the obvious reply is, well, that's very good for you and your ivory towers in Oxford, but most of us live in the real world. But we need to remember that borders too are a fantasy. I might be utopian, but borders are dystopian. Are we ever really going to have hermetically sealed nation states? With those coming in and out are being counted, knowing exactly who's here and who's there? If we think about the tens of thousands of undocumented children born and living their lives in the UK, are we going to just close our eyes and hope that they go away and ignore the injustice and alienation that is growing up amongst us? Are we going to spend billions of taxpayers' pounds deporting them as ever more undocumented children are being born? Is that rational? Is that sensible? Is that really being realistic? We have to remember that borders too are a fantasy, and they are a fantasy that sustains inequality.
If you kept your eyes closed and took it in, Harlem felt, smelled, and even breathed like East London. Hearty, thick, pulsing, home, close, and fading. James Baldwin could see his Harlem in the way Dickens arranged words to describe East London. And you could see your East London in Baldwin's Harlem the very same way. Everything comes full circle, he said, but perhaps this was the unendingness of poverty. From ends to the hood, did we all love more rigorously, more viciously, more violently, because love was also readying to let go? If tomorrow There's even less promise to some of us. Then what of ourselves could we give today to ourselves, to each other? How and when would we be amongst the living if now only belonged to those who had the safety of being present? Would there be a moment where we would not only be the space we leave behind, but the universes we brought into being? If you keep a people poor and drip feed them, and in return they must prove with their lives and productivity that they are useful and worth keeping fed, alive, and then you cut that food line, then it begins to reveal that whiteness does not need to drop bombs or drones to disappear a people. It can cut services, cut access to employment, cut and criminalize, keep our kids in drug economies which criminalize them over food, weed, but never the people who create the demand in the first place. Cut youth centers, cut community centers, cut childhood, cut grass, and replace with astroturf. Cut earth and sky with single-cell apartments, close local markets, close local businesses, close livelihoods, close circuit television, cut off from food, people, and place. It only then turns around to say, look at what these people do to themselves. Cut children, cut children. Inna lillahi wa inna rajiun. To the divine we belong and to the divine we return. My father's heartbreaking last question. Which land does he return to? Land that is familiar to him, but foreign to me. Somebody tell me, where does immigrant Babas go to rest? Bury me wherever I pass. He passes on land that is foreign to him, but familiar to me. And somehow now I have inherited a piece of land on England, half my father's grave. We do not birth anything, we only inherit things. Children, trauma, prayers, unbroken spirit, a tomorrow unlike yesterday, revolution.
Mummy, why are all these children coming with boats across the sea and in front of our house?
Yes, like your granny when she was your age.
Oh, yes. Who had to stay outside in the cold and they didn't want them.
It happens all the time.
But why don't they care, Mama?
Because we adults want to deter as many as possible.
But why?
Because immigration is a problem.
But why?
Because adults want to make scary businesses.
Ooh, are you selling scary sweets?
Yes, sweet guns.
Ooh, are they pink for girls and blue for boys?
Blue for boys and girls looking after them.
Where are all these boys and girls?
They walk miles and miles. They're hidden in a van and cramped on a boat in a rough sea.
Do they have to pay tickets to come here?
Thousands of dollars.
Ooh, who gives them? Their mommy and daddy?
Most probably.
Where do they find them?
Selling their land, ask people to lend them.
Why don't they stay where they are and buy sweets from the supermarket?
Because it is bombed or they're not made there anymore.
Ooh, are they going to come and make sweets here then?
If they don't die in the way, then they will.
So they will work and make us the sweets and send some back as well.
Yes, this is the idea.
Ooh, this is so sweet, but I have a better idea.
Do you? Tell me then.
They could have stayed there, and we will make sure that they make the sweets there, and if they wanted to come here, then they could as well.
Yes, sweetheart, they could.
I dreamt a few years back that I was in a supermarket, checking out when I had this dark and luminous and devastating realization, in that clear way, not that oh yeah way, that my life would end. I wept in line, watching people go by with their carts, watching the cashier move items over the scanner, feeling such an absolute love for this life, and the mundane fact of buying groceries with other people whom I do not know, like all the banalities, would be no more so soon, or now, good as now. It's a feeling I've had outside of dreams as well, an acute understanding, looking at a beloved's back as the blankets gather at her waist and the light comes in through the gauzy shades lying across her shoulder, watching my mother sleep in her chair, her mouth part open, the skin above her eyes exactly like mine, looking at the line of mourners, tugging the last red fish pepper from the plant. Among the most beautiful things I've ever heard anyone say came from my student, Bethany, talking about her pedagogical aspirations or ethos, how she wanted to be as a teacher, and what she wanted her classroom to be. What if we joined our wildernesses together? Sit with that for a minute. That the body, the life, might carry a wilderness, an unexplored territory, and that yours and mine might somewhere, somehow, meet, might even join. And what if the wilderness, perhaps the densest wild in there, thickets, bogs, swamps, uncrossable ravines and rivers, have I made the metaphor clear, is our sorrow, or, to use Zadie Smith's term, the intolerable. It astonishes me sometimes, no, often, how every person I get to know, everyone, regardless of everything, by which I mean everything, lives with some profound personal sorrow. Brother addicted, mother murdered, dad died in surgery, rejected by their family, cancer came back, evicted, fetus not okay. Everyone, regardless, always, of everything. Not to mention the existential sorrow we all might be afflicted with, which is that we and what we love will soon be annihilated, which sounds more dramatic than it might. Let me just say, dead. Is this sorrow, of which our impending being no more might be the foundation, the great wilderness? Is sorrow the true wild? And if it is, and if we join them, your wild to mine, what's that? For joining, too, is a kind of annihilation. What if we joined our sorrows, I'm saying, what if that is joy?
After hours in the penetrating rain, I was suddenly damp and chilled, and the path back to the cabin is a temptation. I could so easily retreat to tea and dry clothes, but I cannot pull myself away. However alluring the thought of warmth, there is no substitute for standing in the rain to awaken every sense, senses that are muted within four walls, where my attention would be on me instead of all that is more than me. inside looking out. I could not bear the loneliness of being dry in a wet world. Here is the rainforest. I don't want to just be a bystander to rain, passive and protected. I want to be part of the downpour, to be soaked, along with the dark hummus that squishes underfoot. I wish that I could stand like a shaggy cedar with rain seeping into my bark, that water could dissolve the barrier between us. I want to feel what the cedars feel and know what they know. If there is a meaning in the past and in the imagined future, it is captured in the moment. When you have all the time in the world, you can spend it not on going somewhere, but on being where you are. I stretch out, close my eyes, and listen to the rain.
How we begin this morning in response to what they did yesterday afternoon. I see water all around me. The skies throw it down, wringing out the clouds. The trees shake off their showers like puppies in summer. The fruit I bite, the ripeness oozes down my chin. I wriggle my toes in salt waves, sharp drops dance my skin. I shiver head to toe. My water trembles, and leaks stormy downpour my face. I clench damp fists. I've been praying, I've been spelling, and these are what my prayers look like, how I've been witching my words. Dear God, dear Gaia, spirits of the air and flame, guardians of the earth and sea, I come from 2 countries, I come from 2 mothers, from moving winds across mountain oceans. One is thirsty, another is on fire. All return to dust, yet floods will rise. We need a drink. Later that night, between dusk and dawn, under this blue moon, I clasped my heart in my hand, an atlas in my lap. I dipped my fingers in blood and ran my fingers across the whole world. Where does it hurt? It answered. Everywhere, everywhere. Everywhere. Where can it heal? Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. Where is hope? Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere.
Mẹ mang đầy bụng, mẹ bồng trên tay. Con ngủ ngủ đi con. Con ngủ đi con, đứa con của mẹ ra đời. Trên môi vang vọng một lời đau thương. 20 năm đàn con khôn lớn ra ngoài chiến trường, đứa con da vàng lạc hồng. Ngủ đi con, dù con ấy đã phong trần, ôi vết thương nào đục sâu da nồng. Thịt xương này mẹ nhọc nhằn hôm mai. Con ngủ đi con, sao tuổi 20 sao tuổi 20.
멍멍개야 짖지 마라 꼬꼬다가 울지 마라 우리 아기 잘고 잔다 짜잔 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 멍게야 짖지 마라 꼬꼬다가 오지 마라 우리 아기 잘도 잔다 짜잔 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 금자동아 금자동아 짜잔 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 짜잔